So my name is Lynn. I'm based in New York City, and my podcast is called Homoground. I spotlight LGBTQ musicians, and I started it about 8.5 years ago. I was living in North Carolina, and I grew up there as a queer Filipina who didn't quite fit in. So growing up, I used music as a way to kind of navigate my identity and to just find things that I could relate to. And so basically Homoground is kind of the thing that I wish I had when I was growing up. Being a part of my music community back home was really special. That's where I kind of found the people that I could actually relate to and just be like, oh wow, I'm not alone in this, and there are other people going through similar experiences as me. So I would go to shows all the time. I lived in a small town, so we didn't really get that many well-known bands that would come through. So it was a while until I saw women on stage rocking out. And I remember the first time that I did, it was like so powerful. It was like, that is awesome. Like, can I do that? Am I allowed to do that? And it was just very transformative. So I guess, doing Homoground as a podcast was kind of just an evolution of what I was already doing, making mixed CDs, making mixtapes, and then just figuring out, I can make playlists on my computer and then upload it and distribute it to people. So sharing music was always something that really drove me. So that's kind of like the backstory of how I combined music and LGBT together as a podcast.
And then how did you actually get started? Did you build an audience first through your social media, or just got started right away? You bought the audio, the computer, and did you find that daunting? Was it really expensive to even start?
I mentioned going to shows. There weren't really often shows that I was interested in. But when there were, I would get really excited about it and would go to the show, and then the band would be playing to a room of 10 people or less. And the bands would get disappointed and be like, oh man, people don't show up here. And that really devastated me because I was so excited to see new music coming to my town. So I think using podcasts as a way to promote the local music that was happening in my community was motivation to start. And so I was just doing it I had a MacBook, and I had really no equipment. Just used the built-in microphone, and the audio sounded horrible. But that's what I had at the time, and I really wanted to get the music out there and to get people excited about bands that were coming to my town.
Okay, and how did you reach out to these bands?
So starting locally, there was 1 or 2 venues that would get a lot of shows, and so just seeing what was coming up, and then reaching out to bands, emailing them, saying, hey, I want to feature your music on my podcast to get people psyched, and people were really excited to be a part of that. And at the time too, I had a lot of friends that were making really interesting music, and I felt, I'm in North Carolina, I feel like there are probably other towns where there's someone going through the same thing as me, and I just want to get this music out to other small towns. So just featuring my friends at first, whoever had access to.
Sure.
Yeah, and then after the first couple episodes, I started getting emails from people I didn't know.
Oh, really?
And that was really exciting.
Was that instantly or after a few months?
Probably a few months into it.
And then people start reaching out to you, being featured on Homoground?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I put up a submission form on the website, and people just kept submitting, and so I was like, all right, I guess I'm just going to keep making podcasts. So we featured probably over 1,000 bands now over the past 8.5 years, and it's just been awesome discovering new music from all over the world, all different genres, and getting to meet interesting people along the way.
So what do you say, 5 key resources that helped you throughout your podcasting journey?
Let's see, resources. I think, what aspect?
People, mentors, software,
Yeah, in terms of like the technical stuff, really, I'm honestly just still using GarageBand. I saw the workshop yesterday on Heidenberg, and it's like, that's awesome how easy it is on that program. So I don't know, I'm an independent podcaster, so I was self-taught. Sometimes being at conferences where there's like all these NPR and like radio people kind of intimidates me because I'm not as fancy as when it comes in terms of like producing. I just kind of was like, this is what I want to do,
Sure.
and I'm just going to try it out and see what happens.
Nice. So when did you start? Like, when did you actually publish your first podcast?
It was in January 2019.
Wow, 8 years about. Okay. And what do you wish you had known when you first started getting into this podcasting sphere?
Well, being consistent is hard. So when I first set out, I wanted to do a new episode every week. And that was, I think I just had the energy and the drive. But doing that after a while, it's kind of exhausting. So I guess finding a balance and, whatever your podcast is, your release schedule is going to be different. So back then, a lot of shows were kind of based off of the radio model, where it's like a weekly radio show. So that's kind of where I was like, getting my start from, modeled after community radio. And now, podcasts are putting episodes out in batches, so like seasons. So it's been really interesting to kind of just see the transitions and the shifts that have been happening over time, and now thinking about my podcast in different ways. So how can I make it more sustainable? Because doing it every week was starting to get really exhausting. And that's the cool thing about being independent too, is that you can experiment. So I've been able to experiment with the format and try different things. When I first started out, I was mostly just playing music and just talking a little bit about the bands, if they had shows coming up or records that were coming out. And now I'm tapping more into doing interviews. So instead of me reading what someone wrote in, now we're actually hearing their voice. So, I've always been interested in sharing other people's stories, and if they can share it in their own voice, I feel like that's so much more powerful.
That's good. And you'd mentioned experimenting. Can you tell us something that you tried that you failed miserably at, and looking back what you learned, and something that you tried that you were really successful and want to repeat over and over and over again?
Yeah, so actually the interviews have been one of the struggles. Just, sometimes you forget to hit record and technical things happen, trying to figure out how to get the best quality audio when you're interviewing someone that, lives in a different location. So, yeah, doing the interviews has been my pain points.
Sure. And something that you tried and you're like, oh, I can repeat this.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the success of Homoground growing as fast as it did, and kind of building that community, I think it was that my priorities were always in, allowing myself to be creative, coming up with different jingles to use at the beginning of the episode or throughout, and also just experimenting and collaborating. So having a lot of collaboration has been really nice, because podcasting can kind of be a little isolating if you're doing it by yourself, you're sitting in your room, you're not really interacting with people. So being able to collaborate with other people has been, get music that they were listening to or enjoying and share that with a new audience and making new friends and connections that way. So that was kind of, I feel like, one of the first ways that I kind of, reached out to different communities and networks that I wouldn't have had access to. And just, really including the people, the bands that I'm featuring, so making it really collaborative.
Nice. And you said, you keep mentioning community. You started 2011, now it's 2019. How big is the Homoground family at this point?
So yeah, it's hard to say. It's spread out all over the world. I guess it was a year and a half ago, I launched a Patreon community to help raise money to keep the podcast going, and also just to build that community. And that has been going okay. I feel like, there's a lot of people interact with Homoground on different channels.
Sure.
So I would like to figure out a way to bring it all together more.
Yeah.
But right now, a lot of the community are musicians or people who love music. So one of the things that we're moving more into is just like, okay, how can we provide some resources that can really benefit our community? So like I mentioned, we have the submission form on our website, and one of the questions on the form asks, what is your biggest challenge? And it can be like related to music or just life in general. And I really get a sense of kind of what is happening, kind of like a snapshot of what's happening for musicians right now, or navigating the music industry from a queer LGBTQ lens. So basing off of that, we launched our first webinar, I think it was last month, and the topic was addressing sexual assault and harassment in live music spaces, because unfortunately, that's something that is an issue in the queer music scene, and not just the queer music scene. I feel like any music scene, that's an issue. And we really wanted to take a proactive approach and be like, okay, we're creating this thing that's bringing a lot of people together, so how can we put a message out there to make these spaces safer and just feel more comfortable, and people can, have a good time without the fear of being harassed, and what we can do to step up and to make these spaces safe.
Sure. And you mentioned Patreon. Is everyone familiar with Patreon here? Okay, can you elaborate what Patreon is exactly?
Sure, so it's a crowdfunding site. It's similar to like Kickstarter, but basically people can, if they want to support the work that you're doing, they can become a Patreon subscriber, and they can choose to donate anywhere from $1 to however much a month. And depending on what level they donate at, they can get different rewards. So for instance, one reward is, I think it's $5, and you get your name shouted out on the podcast as a Patreon supporter. So yeah, just coming up, I don't know, like, I feel like I have this internal conflict too about wanting to ask for money, but
Sure.
also that's a reality of doing work that you don't really get monetary,
Yeah.
you don't really generate much through it. So relying on the community to support it. And I've been doing this the whole time pretty much. I've had full-time jobs and have been working alongside to keep it going. So just trying to figure out ways to make it more sustainable.
Okay. So Patreon is one. What other ways, other like guest funnels or ways to monetize that you've tried with Homoground?
So, like I said, I just have this aversion to like even working with sponsors, like negotiating ad rates and all that stuff. It just doesn't feel fun for me. So I wanted to really come up with creative ways. And one of the things that I did early on, this was in 2012 when Kickstarter was like the big thing and lots of people were creating Kickstarter campaigns. I had this idea to make a deck of playing cards, and I wanted to include a lot of different artists, and we would illustrate the cards featuring different feminist musicians. And so that was kind of like the first really big project that we did that really included a lot of different people. And actually, Eddie, who's here, was one of the artists in that project. And this is the first time we're meeting because Eddie lives in Hamilton and I live in New York. So we've known each other for a while, but this is the first time we've met in person. So it's been really cool, like the connections that I've been able to form through the podcast. And yeah, so we did a Kickstarter and we raised money to produce this deck of cards, and all the sales from those cards went back into funding the podcast.
Wow. That's crazy. Any other products that you use to sell or promote?
Yeah, so if you came in, there were some stickers at the front. We have stickers. I usually just give them out for free. It's a cool just way to get the word out. Sometimes you'll see them, people stick them around, and they're like, what is Homoground? And they're curious and they look it up. Or sometimes, I don't know, I'll go back, I'll see a Homoground sticker, and I go back the next day and someone like ripped Homo off of it or something like that. So that's been really interesting. And just like, you know, kind of having like our own merch. So t-shirts is another thing, and we've had some artists design different t-shirts.
And from like coming up with merch to generate funds to run Homoground, what would you say are the biggest expenses to running Homoground?
Yeah, I think the biggest expense really, I think, is just putting the energy into it and finding the time, especially when you are working a lot of other jobs that brings in the rent and the money to pay the bills. So I think for me, yeah, the time has been more of the issue. And I think, you know, with limited resources, you are limited in what you can do. One thing I've been wanting to do is work with other producers and, you know, have the episodes not just be like me hosting, but having someone in a completely different area of the world who knows about the music scene that's happening there and can speak to that and can, you know, go and get interviews with the local bands. So really broadening the reach and making more, I guess, thoughtful content. And yeah, I just want to put more energy into it. And so I think, you know, having more resources allows you to do that.
Yeah. And now where do you see Homoground in the next, let's say, next year, 5 years, 10 years?
So yeah, I feel like getting into different forms of media too is interesting. So doing more things that are video or maybe live events, I feel like is a good direction. A lot of podcasts are doing these events where they can bring the community together and also record them and have that for content for people who aren't able to attend live events. So providing access to things like that. And I don't know, I would really like to do some kind of like queer music festival or just something fun and involving music, yeah.
So for each episode, can you walk us through each step to create, let's say, a mixtape or the interview?
Gotcha. So I'll take you through, like, when bands submit their music to us, I use a Dropbox. So people fill out the form, all of the files go into a Dropbox. And that includes the submission form that they filled out, they upload a photo of their band, and then MP3s. And one of the cool things about Homoground is all the music that we're playing, and this is how we can get around all those copyright things, because a lot of, you know, one reason why people don't do a lot of music is because of the copyrights. So we have, you know, a consent form where people are like, yes, I make this music and I give you permission to feature it. So it's been really cool to be able to, you know, it's people directly submitting their music to us.
Yeah.
So I feel like that just builds relationships.
Sure.
And so once they submit the form, it all gets uploaded, and then I go through it, and you know, it depends. Sometimes we feature a lot of different music festivals or events, so we'll spotlight, like for example, there was an event happening in New Orleans this weekend. They're having their Pride weekend, and so there's an event that they're doing called Lost Binary, and it's benefiting Girls Rock New Orleans. So they have a list. I think the bill is like 10 bands playing, and we featured not all the bands, but a majority of them, and had the organizers of the event talk about why they organized the event and why it's important to have events like this. So I think it's a really cool way to spotlight what other cities are doing too. Yeah, so for those episodes, it's just reaching out to bands or having them submit, and then just kind of arranging it. And I use GarageBand, and I just upload it to, I use Acast, which is a podcast network, and they host it, and then it distributes it to iTunes, Spotify, and all those places.
And the cities that you that listen to your episodes, were you surprised to find that, oh my gosh, this city or this country is listening to Homoground? Which city or state or country were you really surprised to have that reach?
Yeah, I think it was really cool when places that I had never heard of started popping up, or places outside of the U.S. And so, Victoria Island was one of those places, and I just remember getting email from someone there who was like really excited. I'm like, I don't even know where this place is, so that was really cool. A lot of places in Europe and Australia, so those have been like kind of the main countries. So they have tools out there that make it really easy for you to find those people.
The return on investment on LinkedIn from brand building and from standpoint, LinkedIn is not worth the ROI. Facebook is no longer worth the ROI. So if anything, it's really would be your blog, creating search engine optimized words through those blogs, and then that will promote, that will parlay into your social media, and with that, people will be able to find you organically without having spent one penny on AdWords, AdSense, or LinkedIn. So if you're looking to do this lean, and again, I'm coming from a startup background where you have to wear multiple hats, and your burn rate is so short that you got to figure out how to do this, and it's through the blogging, niche blogging, nailing down those long tail keywords in your tags, in your website, in your blogs, and then promoting that on your social media account. And then with that, you'll be surprised how quickly you'll start getting organic results, organic searches, because that's what people are looking for at that moment in time. So, yeah.
Our most successful podcast that we've ever done to date, and it's just on my website. I just take it from the station and put it on my own website.
Exactly.
I don't do any promotion. Other than for the Organ Donation Awareness Month, where Jay's received a kidney from his sister, and we actually, through one of the connections, got to interview Toby Boulay, the dad of Logan Boulay, who died in a Humboldt crash. And it went national. I mean, we had literally thousands and thousands of people tuning in to read that, because it was topical and it was of the moment and everything, and we did come up with some pretty creative hashtags.
Oh, we sure did.
But that was such a lot of effort. If I had to do that every week, I would drive myself into the ground, because this is a volunteer thing.
Sure.
So on top of everything else you do at the station and everything, and getting your show ready for the next week and all the guests organized, and now you've got to do the podcast and promote the podcast. It's a lot of work for
Yeah, definitely.
There's no revenue generation.
Especially, when you're doing so many of the different components that go into it. So you're not only just producing it, but also trying to promote it and do marketing. It's a lot of hats to wear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing I also found, and if you notice, like on the description of this talk, it was how to start a top 10 podcast. And I think Luke approached me because Homoground pops up in a lot of top 10 lists of top 10 LGBTQ podcasts to listen to. And, when I was starting out, I kind of, was like, all right, I'm wearing all these hats, I have to do my own promotion. So just reaching out to different publications that are covering anything that was like queer, LGBTQ focused, and just telling them about Homoground. So a lot of them have their email addresses on the websites, or just finding ways to kind of get in front of them and to have them know what I'm doing. And so I think, my background is also kind of marketing and doing community engagement. So I think I've been really lucky to have that as a background too, to really help get the word out there. Go ahead.
How much, okay, so talking about niching yourself to a certain degree, you can niche yourself by topic, but you can also niche yourself by method. And this is something that I've been thinking about, like, that general things don't really do so well, but I can think of a few podcasts that strictly speaking, are as broad as possible. And one of the things that jumps to mind right away for me is the League of Nerds. And I don't know if you've heard of the League of Nerds, but they talk about literally everything. They talk about like homeopathy and the falling patterns of the 9/11 towers, and they talk about people who drink turpentine as a medicine and all that. But as broad-based as it is, it's a chemist, a biochemist, and a professional skeptic, and they're approaching these issues from a scientific method. So,
What was it called?
League of Nerds.
Oh, this just sounds like so much fun.
This is also an exact kind of sentence like in here Sebastian saying.
Yeah. They had to dissolve because a couple of them got like adult jobs and didn't have to drive for it anymore. But Miles Powers is still going, and he's pretty strong. But like, it sounds like you're not just a queer music show. Like I can't really imagine you talking very much about, Tegan and Sarah and the Scissor Sisters. Like your method seems to be more people contacting you and talking about like smaller local bands, startup bands, sort of like the, to use the 2000s term, the like off the beaten path hipster bands. And that seems to be really what your niche is. It's not really just queer music. There's multiple queer music channels. And your niche is more about how you contact the artists and how you communicate with the artists and how you speak with them, as creators. Do you integrate that into your marketing in any way? That the way you do a queer music show is different.
Yeah, I guess when I am talking about it, I promote it as just a queer music podcast, but yeah, that is a good observation. A lot of the bands that we feature are independent, so I think, having that focus. We have featured more well-known artists in the past, every now and then, but I think that also comes down to getting the music licenses. And that's one of the reasons why certain artists we can't feature on the podcast. I definitely have tried reaching out to bigger names, and they're just like, oh no, we can't do it because of the copyrights. So I think, for what I'm doing, I think it is really to uplift the voices that aren't on record labels or don't have these, big record labels, corporations, or things behind them, promoting them.
Do you incorporate that into your marketing at all? This sort of uplifting message?
I think in the descriptions, we talk about, how it is a lot of underrepresented musicians. But yeah, that's a good thing to think about some more. How to tie that in a larger sense. Yeah. Thank you.